from the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus. This is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Sadie Chung. Here is your news to 12 o'clock. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization is saying Canada should prepare for the rapid development of a second COVID booster program over the coming weeks. The program would prioritize adults 80 and over and residents of long-term care in other communal settings. The advisory also said they aim to provide a second booster dose 6 months after the previous booster. The new recommendations comes as public health indicators tick upwards across Canada. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix will have a COVID-19 briefing and are expected to announce the rollout of the fourth dose at 1 p.m. The BC government says it's expanding support services as thousands of displaced Ukrainians are expected to relocate to the province. An online portal is now open with information for Ukrainians fleeing the Russian invasion and BC residents who want to help. The province says most Ukrainians coming to BC are expected to arrive through a federal emergency travel program. This will allow them to apply for a work permit and stay in Canada's temporary residence for as long as 3 years. The Prince Rupert Port Authority says 26 cruise ships are expected to visit between May and September after a 2-year hiatus due to the pandemic. It says the Windstar Starbreeze will kick off the season with its arrival on May 29th. The vessels are expected to bring about 14,000 passengers to the city on BC's north coast, a boost for tourism in the region. Cruise tourism is estimated to have contributed to more than $50 million in Prince Rupert and the surrounding area from 2004 to 2019. Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez has introduced a bill to make digital giants compensate Canadian media outlets for reusing their news content. The bill, designed to support Canada's independent media, is modeled on Australian law, making tech companies such as Google and Meta pay for news content on their platforms. Rodriguez says the news industry in Canada is in a crisis.
Just think for a moment that between 2008 and 2015, and today, 451 news outlets closed their doors in Canada. In the last 2 years, 64 of them closed their doors.
Digital platforms that fail to comply with the new law could face financial penalties. A leading expert on online child protection says she's very optimistic that preparations for a law combating internet harm will map out a way to combat online child abuse. Reporter Laurie Paris has the story.
Canadian Centre for Child Protection Director Leanna McDonald says the cybertip.ca helpline has seen a 37% rise in reports of victimization of children online over the past year. She says there is an urgent need for action to force tech companies to swiftly remove indecent images of children, because so far the voluntary approach hasn't been working. The Heritage Minister is preparing to reintroduce a bill tackling online harms, including racist and anti-Semitic abuse, and last week set up an expert panel to advise them. The first version was introduced last year, but died without being debated when the election was called. Laurie Paris, The Canadian Press.
Heading overseas, Russian international politics have turned into turmoil since their invasion on Ukraine. Tiger Ann has more on the development.
The European Union says 19 Russian diplomats are being expelled from Belgium. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said he decided to designate persona non grata, aka unwelcoming, a number of officials of the permanent missions of the Russian Federation to the EU for engaging in activities contrary to their diplomatic status. He also said that the Russian envoy was being summoned to the European Union to explain their move. EU countries such as France, Netherlands, Sweden, and Spain have also removed Russian diplomats from their country and accuses the envoys of being spies. Tiger Ann, 1680, The Crow.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's president says those responsible for Russian atrocities in his country need to be held accountable. Listener discretion is advised. Reporter Sagar Meghani has the story.
Appearing remotely before the UN Security Council, Volodymyr Zelensky said through an interpreter he saw the Russian carnage firsthand in Bucha.
They cut off limbs, cut their throats, slashed their throats. Women were raped and killed in front of their children.
Comparing the actions of Russian troops to those of Islamic State militants.
The Russian military and those who gave them orders must be brought to justice immediately for war crimes.
In front of a tribunal like the one at Nuremberg after World War II, Russia says images of the atrocities in Bucha and elsewhere are fake, suggesting Ukraine staged the scenes. Sagar Magani, Washington.
Elon Musk, the billionaire Tesla CEO and now Twitter's largest shareholder and newly appointed board member, may have thoughts on a long-standing request from users. Should there be an edit button? Musk launched a Twitter poll asking whether users wanted the option, and more than 3 million people have voted as of today. Many Twitter users have long begged for an edit button, but some caution it could change the nature of the platform. The poll closes this evening. In sports, Vancouver Canucks forward Brock Besser is out with an upper body injury. The team plays the Golden Knights again tomorrow, followed by the Arizona Coyotes on home ice Thursday. With BC's junior hockey leagues approaching the end of their season, Aiden Sarah reflects on the first full year working with the presence of COVID-19.
The Western Hockey League and British Columbia Junior Hockey League are vastly approaching the conclusion of their regular seasons, whilst the Pacific Junior Hockey League recently crowned their playoff champions. It's the first full season of junior hockey in the province since the start of the pandemic. All three leagues were seriously impacted by COVID in the 2020-21 season, with the WHL and BCHL running shortened pod seasons in the spring of 2021, and the PGHL cancelling their season altogether after a brief start in the fall of 2020. The PGHL's Ridge Meadows Flames general manager Derek Bedard says that while the season proved challenging, working through the threat of COVID-19 was in the end manageable.
Our club had a policy where people had to be vaccinated to be a part of the team. That obviously put us in a very good position to feel insulated in our own little team bubble that we knew everybody was vaccinated. For our rink, the rules really were very easy to follow.
The PGHL season wrapped up last Wednesday as the Langley Trappers defeated the White Rock Whalers for the league championship. Aiden Sarah, 1680, The Crow.
Reporter Aiden Sarah joins us now live. Aiden, what happened with these junior leagues last season?
Well, the major junior and junior A leagues managed to string together shortened seasons last spring, and you heard Derek, his Ridge Meadows Flames played just 4 games in the fall of 2020. Following those 4 games, the Junior B League was shut down, and there weren't actually Junior B games played here until the fall of 2021.
And did junior hockey leagues have a vaccine mandate?
Yeah, the Western Hockey League and the major junior side did, as well as the BC Junior A League. They both did have vaccine mandates. The Pacific Junior B Hockey League, which is where those Flames compete, didn't have a league-wide vaccine mandate. However, Derek did tell me that as a team, the Flames decided to have their own vaccine mandate, and he said that helped alleviate worries involved with COVID.
Thank you, Aiden. NHL scoring leader Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers visit the San Jose Sharks. McDavid is riding a 13-game point streak and has 26 points over that span. The Oilers have won 4 straight games, and also tonight, the Montreal Canadiens host the Ottawa Senators. Brad Gushue and his Canadian squad are putting their undefeated record on the line against Germany today at the World Men's Curling Championship in Las Vegas. Gushue's rink improved to 5-0 with a 10-4 win over Italy yesterday, and Germany enters the match with a 3-2 record. The game kicks off at 2 p.m. Tiger Woods says he's planning to play in the Masters. Reporter Mike Kempin has the story.
Woods made the announcement Tuesday morning, saying as of now he intends to play in the tournament, which begins Thursday. It was a little more than a year ago when Woods nearly lost his leg in a car crash. Woods plans to play 9 more practice holes on Wednesday before making a final decision. And he thinks if he plays, he can win the tournament. Woods has won the Masters 5 times. He says the biggest challenge will be walking the 72 holes over a 4-day period, but he thinks he'll be up to it. I'm Mike Hempen.
And in Canadian soccer star, Alphonso Davies has been named the CONCACAF Men's Player of the Year for 2021 after helping Canada qualify for the World Cup for the first time since 1986. Davies appeared in 7 World Cup qualifying games for Canada in 2021, with the team posting 3 wins and 4 draws. In weather, we have a partially cloudy sky, 9 degrees here in Burnaby, with the high of 11 later today. That was your news to 12 o'clock. I'm Sadie Chung. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
week's companion call at BCIT. This week, I'm your host. My name is Braden Ursel, and I'm with my co-host, Ben Bazran. Ben, how's it going, man?
It's going great. I'm really excited to be doing this, and we got a great topic today, so excited to dive into it, and couldn't think of a better co-host, so happy to be doing it with you, Bray.
Yes, definitely a very, very exciting topic this week, as we have decided to talk about none other than the Vancouver Canucks. It's been kind of a crazy season, a little bit of ups and downs, but there's definitely been a lot of storylines along the way. We have two very special guests coming in to talk to us about it. Jeff Patterson of the Sekeres and Price podcast. He's been covering the Canucks for well over a decade. And we're also joined by Clay Emo, a super fan and a season ticket holder. It's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Can't wait to hear what those two have to say. It's been an up and down season for the Canucks, to say the least. And they only have 14 games remaining. And the playoff push is alive right now. It's alive and well. So really excited to see and hear what these two experts have to say. And I know, Braden, we're really excited to talk to them and hear their Canucks fandom, and we can kind of gossip maybe a little bit about what's going to happen, after the season. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that right now, but I'm really excited to hear what these two have to say.
All right. Well, before we get to our experts, I thought it might be a good idea to have a little bit of a fun Canucks related game. Kind of like, we just choose a word and we say that word, and then the other person, they just say the first thing that comes to mind. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's just Canucks related, just kind of, lighten up the mood a little bit before we get down to the serious nitty gritty talk,
All right. I'll go first. Boudreaux.
Bruce, there it is.
Benning.
Awestruck. I don't know.
JT Miller.
Absolute beauty.
Thatcher Demko.
Thatcher the Snatcher, man. Best goalie in the league.
Best goalie in the league. All right. And last one I have is Rogers Arena.
My paradise.
Let's go.
Yeah. All right, man. I got 5 words for you coming at you real quick.
Let's do it.
Pavel Bure.
The Rocket.
Travis Green.
I feel bad for him. I don't know.
Flying Skate.
Legendary jersey.
Henrik Sedin.
The captain, the GOAT.
Brad Marchand.
Hate him. Pest. Loser.
What a plug, eh? Brad Marchand should only be said probably once on a Canucks podcast, so that's enough. Let's get talking to our experts. Why don't you introduce them, Ben?
And with that, we'll welcome our guests in. I'd like to welcome Jeff Patterson and Clay Emu in. Jeff is a reporter for the Canucks, and Clay is the super fan for the Vancouver Canucks. Thank you both for joining us today on our call. We really appreciate your guys' time and your insight today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for asking, Ben and Braden.
For sure. So I'll kind of start with a question for both of you guys. I'd like the answer to. If you were to put into words, how the season for the Vancouver Canucks has gone so far, and maybe give it a grade out of 10, what would that be for you?
Well, I mean, that's such a loaded question, because I would have to give it about 15 different grades probably to represent the many twists and turns that have led us to this point with a month to go. But I mean, it's been fascinating, I think, is a word that certainly applies. Highly disappointing off the hop for a team that had high expectations, and not everybody was buying in that they were going to be a playoff team, but certainly those were the plans that the organization itself had laid out. And then to have 8 wins, 25 games into the season, and have to undergo historic house cleaning unlike anything we have seen in decades, I think that gives you a pretty good indication of how far off the rails things were for the Canucks. And so to think now that they are still legitimately in a playoff hunt with a month to go, again, quite remarkable. There have been some incredible individual performances. There have been a handful of performances that have been underwhelming or disappointing. And that probably is the case most seasons, but they sort of feel like extremes this time around. And I give the guys that have responded to the coaching change a ton of credit. I was in the group that thought that they were so far buried that there was no way that the playoffs would be even a remote possibility. And so to claw back the way that they have, and to watch some of the players emerge and performances like JT Miller, and to see Quinn Hughes turn his game back in the right direction and Thatcher Demko take it up another notch, it's been a wild ride. And so I can't wait to sort of see how it plays itself out with 14 games remaining.
Yeah, it's a tale two seasons for sure. As Jeff said, 8 wins in the first 25. So to be 8-15-2, I'll give some grades. I would say that's a 3 out of 10. And then I think since Boudreau has taken over, I'd give that a solid 9, not a perfect 10. So you average that out, it's really a 6 or so, which isn't great. As Jeff said, a lot of great expectations for this team, playoff hopes, but then a horrible start and a remarkable last 3 months or so. So will it be enough to get in? Likely not. And you add the intrigue of all the off-season, the off-ice changes, and it's been certainly a season to remember for sure. But it always seems to be like that here. So I'll give it a solid 6 out of 10, which isn't great.
No, definitely not great. But I mean, I think I have to kind of agree with the two of you. Like it's black and white on kind of how this season went. From from the very beginning, it was bad, and then we've kind of gotten to this point where it's pretty good. But is it good enough? Are we there yet? And was there enough time in kind of the coaching change to prove for this team to prove themselves? It's so black and white and up the middle. You just can't really tell still.
So I'll kind of go into my next question here, which is that the inconsistency the Canucks bring is definitely there. You lose to Detroit, you lose to Buffalo, and then you have a great road trip before this last game against St. Louis, where you're beating Dallas 4-1. So this team's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde right now. Are the Canucks in no man's land? When you look at how our core stacks up against the rest of the league, the West is very weak this year, and we're still fighting for a spot. So even with Boudreau taking over, are we kind of stuck in this, like, we're not good enough to contend, we're not bad enough to get a draft pick? Are we kind of in this no man's land? I'll start with you, Jeff, if that's cool.
Well, that's certainly where they have been for a number of years. I think the hope was, if you go back to playoff seasons, the bubble in Edmonton, the Canucks were one of the it teams in the National Hockey League. When you looked at the performances of Elias Pettersson in his first taste of the postseason, and Quinn Hughes and Bo Horvat rose up, and there were others, and obviously Bubble Demko at the time, and they came out of that, and I think there were a lot of people around the league that were buying what the Canucks were selling. And obviously, there were departures, there were questionable decisions made by management, and here they are now. That management group is gone. And so it is sort of tough to pinpoint exactly where they are as an organization, because you've got this new regime that's come in. They've had a few months to analyze and assess, but they really haven't made those signature moves that have given us a glimpse of what direction they want to take this team. And certainly the team is hamstrung by its cap situation, and that's not on the new management group, that's on the old group, but they are going to have to find a way to find some cap flexibility. I mean, cap flexibility is king in today's National Hockey League, and they have none of it, and they're still hampered by a couple of contracts that are going to dog them for a few more years at the very least. So I think, to answer that question, we need to get to the offseason, because this team, this management group, elected pretty much to stand pat at the trade deadline, other than moving Tyler Mott for a draft pick and Travis Hamonic, which was a nice bit of business on the part of Patrick Alvin and his group. But in terms of those decisions, what's the future for JT Miller? What's the future for Bo Horvat? What are they going to do with Brock Besser? Until we get a sense of what they prioritize, where they want to commit their cap dollars, and are they able to move out a piece or two as well to get some of that flexibility that I mentioned? Those are the moves that not just me, but I think many in this market are going to be watching and anticipating in the offseason. It didn't happen at the trade deadline. They elected to keep this group together to see how far it ultimately could push, but I do think change is coming, and a pretty good chance that it comes a lot closer to the NHL draft in July, because that's sort of that next window of opportunity on the NHL calendar. So I'm not trying to dodge the question, but we don't know the direction that this management group wants to take this team, and we really haven't had any sort of telltale signs on that, but they are coming, and they're going to come pretty quickly after the season is done.
Totally fair. Clay, for you, where do you kind of see the team right now, and where do you kind of see them moving, in the future?
I agree with Jeff's assertion that we'll know more in the offseason for sure. For me, I look at the team that we've seen the past 3 months, and they're good. They're not really good, but they're good. But they've spent so much energy and physical and mental energy just digging themselves out of the hole that they dug, that I'm still not sure what we're seeing is truly the team that we have. We have all-stars, one all-star at each position in Demko, Hughes, and Pedersen, and put Miller up there. Then there's a bit of a drop-off to the Horvats and the Besters, but then there's a big drop-off. And I think one thing that we need to do in the offseason is kind of trim a bit of fat and get stronger everywhere. Somehow knowing that you have those 3 or 4 core pieces, it's easier said than done for sure. And that's kind of the optimism I have, but we've been saying that kind of every year. And you look at the prospect pool, it's not massive. Yes, we have more draft picks this season, but those won't pan out for another 2 or 3 years. So I'm with Jeff in waiting to see what happens in the offseason, but I'm optimistic. That's kind of like my brand, but I don't know either. I would love to think we're the team that we've seen the past 3 months, but I'm not sure if there's enough there yet to do it with sustain this over a full 8-month season, 6-month season.
I think I want to kind of go back, Jeff, to something you were talking about, saying that maybe we're going to see changes, maybe we're not going to see changes, but I think changes are probably coming. In your opinion, you've been around this franchise for a long time. You've covered this team when they were kind of the best in the league for a little bit. What does need to get done in your opinion? Like, are you trying to get rid of Besser? Are you trying to re-sign Miller, even though he's getting up in age? Are you trying to just leave the forward core top 6? We know it's pretty solid where it is, and work on defense. We know we have Demko. We don't have to worry about that. What would you like to see done to have this franchise move to the next step?
Well, I think the first thing that this management group is going to have to do, and they've had 4 months on the job now, is to assess what is Brock Besser. Ultimately, that's the pressing issue here. The decision has to be made. Are they going to commit to him long term? He's 25 now. He has had an underwhelming season. He's probably going to get to 20 goals, but I'm not sure that he gets to 25. And this is a guy that a lot of people were banking on being a 30-goal scorer, not just for this season, but for a stretch of seasons here. And he shows that potential. Again, though, this has been a disappointing year, particularly at even strength. He's a guy that scored 10 of his goals on the power play, but 5-on-5, there has not been a lot of offense there for Brock Besser, particularly since Christmas. So there's a big decision that has to be made, both in the short term. Does this organization value him? Do they want him? Do they see him as part of the future? Or is he an asset that they could peddle? And what could you get in return? They have to address scoring from the wings. This has become a crisis situation for the Vancouver Canucks because really almost all of their offense comes from the center ice position. And I know Elias Pettersson is playing the wing these days, but he's still a center. In the big picture, long-term, to maximize what he can offer this hockey club, he is a centerman for this team. So it's JT Miller, it's Bo Horvat, it's Elias Pettersson, and really that's it. And this past road trip, as successful as it was for the organization, was a microcosm of that. Miller and Horvat each scored 3 goals. Pettersson had the big night in Denver, or in Dallas rather. He had 2 goals. They only had 4 forwards that scored on the road trip, and they're getting nothing from the wings. And as Clay said, they don't have a lot in the prospect pipeline either, outside of Danila Klimovic. And at some point, you hope that he continues to develop and becomes a scoring winger. And Vasily Podkolzin is going to get better as he goes in his rookie year. But right now, all of their offense comes down the middle, and you need scoring. They need some wingers that can put the puck in the net and put it in the net with some regularity. And Connor Garland, let's be honest, it's been a highly disappointing season. As fun as this guy is to watch and spin around and wheel and deal, again, it's the NHL. You have to have a bottom line. And, so that's become a massive concern for me, is they've got to figure out the wing position and how can they find some guys that they can count on to score.
Absolutely.
And just to kind of add on to that just quickly about the whole situation. I mean, in this is the type of league where you have to be really good to be good. You can't, like, the littlest mistake can cost you a game. And I think the Canucks are they're good, but they're not great. And I feel that kind of everywhere on the team, on the roster, besides the net. Like, I mean, they got a great goalie in Thatcher Demko, but outside of that, you got a bunch of good players, but you don't exactly have the greatness in order to become a playoff team and a championship team, in my personal opinion.
And that kind of leads me, Braden, thank you, Braden, into my next question, that kind of maybe one of our final questions here. Clay, I'll start with you, and then Jeff, I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. 14 games remaining in the season. 3 points back of the last playoff wild card spot, I believe still, unless anything else has changed tonight. Percentage chance they make the playoffs. They're probably gonna have to face some stiff competition if they get in, but what percentage do you put on them making the playoffs? And do you think if they did, then the season would be a success?
My heart says 50%. My head says about 10%, what the numbers say. Ben, they have 14 games left. Conventional wisdom says they got to win 11 of those, and 9 of these 14 are against teams that are in a higher position than them in the standings. So we know it's not going to be easy. And even you look at the Vegas game by itself, and you can't presume we're going to win all 3. So really, that's only a 2-point swing. Dallas has got 4 games in hand, and they're already ahead. It's not looking good. They can do good things. They can build confidence. They can maybe rattle off a few wins in a row. But that doesn't mean they're going to beat the lesser teams automatically either. We saw, as you mentioned, how they struggled against the Detroits and Buffaloes of the world. So if you take away all that and just say 11-3, that's actually a better pace than they've done under Bruce Boudreau. So unfortunately, I don't think it's very likely.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, I probably peg it at about 15%. And again, I've sort of at times here written them off, including at the tail end of this most recent homestand. I thought they had shot themselves in the foot and they were done. And, you can't write these guys off. So I give them a ton of credit. I'm going to let them play this out. Obviously, they're going to play the games that are there in front of them. There were a couple of things that I'm looking forward to in the month of April, though. They've got it to a point where those games against Vegas are going to have some significance. And there are 3 of them. And as Clay said, if they split, they're both kind of split. If they each take points off each other, they're sort of chopping each other off at the knees there. So one of the teams probably has to sweep all 3 of those games to remain in the mix for a playoff spot. But if they exchange points, it's really not helping either one of them there. In a perfect world, because I do want this Vancouver-Seattle rivalry to grow, and it's not going to happen in the playoffs this year, but there is a game in the final week of the regular season. I would love it if the Canucks could remain competitive, if the games into the final week, games 79, 80, 81, 82, if they meant something, like imagine the Seattle Kraken had the chance to be the team to eliminate the Vancouver Canucks from playoff contention. Like, you want to build this rivalry up, you want to build up storylines and stuff. Like, I think that would be perfect. So that would mean the Canucks hold up their end of the bargain until the final week of the regular season. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to do that. They've still got a little mini road trip that's going to take them into Minnesota and Calgary. That's going to be difficult. They still have a head-to-head with Dallas at some point. And then, as Clay said, how can we trust this team that has slipped on the banana peel so many times? You've got games against Arizona. You got a game against Ottawa. It's just the Canuck way that there's going to be a few nights where they just don't have it. And really, they've run out of runway. They have no more margin for error. So it's been incredible to see them get to this point. But 11-3 seems like an awfully tall order when they still have a handful of games against some pretty good teams. And 9 of their final 14 are at home, which might be a curse because this team has played way better on the road for whatever reason than it has at home. And that 7-game homestand with just 2 victories was proof of that. So maybe they can get it turned back in the right direction. I hope that they remain relevant as long as possible, but I just think that daylight is fading and it's probably a little bit too much. As Clay said, it's been a remarkable run under Bruce Boudreau, and now over these 14, if they were going to make the playoffs, they have to play at an even higher pace. And I just think it's hard. And you saw it in St. Louis on Monday night. It's hard to bring your A game every single night in the National Hockey League. And they were fine against the Blues, but they weren't at their best. And right now they've got no margin for error.
Completely.
Thanks, Jeff. Now I'm sad again. Thanks a lot, man.
It won't last long with you. I know it won't.
I'll throw in my quick prediction. I kind of said it when the coaching change was happening. It's going to be classic Canucks, the Canuck way, if you will, as Jeff would say. They're going to play great. They're going to look like a playoff team up until right near the end, but they're just going to fall short the Canuck way, looking like 1 to 2 points out of a playoff spot, right where you don't want to be as a hockey fan. But yeah, there you go. That's
all the questions I have. I want to thank you guys so much for your time and for joining Braden and I and really helping us out. I really appreciate your insight and your guys' expertise. It's always fun to talk Canucks hockey.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great night.
All right.
All right, cheers,
Thanks, guys. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Right, yeah, good to see you too, Clay.
All right, Clay. See ya.
Thanks a lot.
The smell of Vi's Chicken and Steakhouse wafts to you as you walk by. You can hear the music coming from the African Methodist Episcopal Fountain Chapel. You can see the residential quarters of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. You might even pass Nora Hendricks and Al Hendricks, grandmother and father of legendary musician Jimi Hendrix. This was a community of Hogan's Alley, an African Canadian community in BC that existed from the 1920s to the 1960s when it was dismantled.
Located on the southwestern side of Strathcona, the name had been used since 1914 according to Vancouver archivist J.S. Matthews. However, it was properly established by 1923, with the establishment of the African Methodist Episcopal Fountain Chapel. Compared to the places that they came from, like Oklahoma, California, and Alberta, the discrimination was not as harsh in Vancouver. Most of the prejudice was targeted towards Asians and indigenous populations, rather than black people. For 40 years, this place would be the center of the black community in Vancouver. That is not to say that the residents of Hogan's Alley were not subjected to racism, just politer brands of it. In 1997, I was adopted from Haiti, Port-au-Prince by my two loving parents. This particular story interested me because it's a narrative that I had never visited before. An exclusively black neighborhood was unheard of where I grew up. Hogan's Alley was a place of refuge to some. It boasted a collection of small cottages, chicken shacks, and makeshift nightclubs. Now, depending on who you asked, it was a haven for culture and community. Or crime-ridden and beleaguered.
For our interviews that you will be listening to in this podcast, you should know a little bit of background. Our first interviewee that you'll be hearing from is Wade Compton. Wade Compton is an author who has done a lot of research into Hogan's Alley and its place in Vancouver's history. In fact, as we were writing the script, we started to realize that a lot of information that we were pulling from was written by Compton himself. The second person that we were interviewing is Ronnie Crump, one of the Crump brothers, who were a pair of performers who lived in Hogan's Alley. The first person you'll be hearing from is Wade Compton, and the elderly gentleman who is in our interviews is Ronnie Crump.
Justify the project. Sometimes we would say their community sucks, it's blighted, it's a slum, so it needs to be destroyed. And conveniently, we need to destroy it so we can put a freeway through it. And then we'll build these high-rise projects.
This neighborhood had always been racially mixed. There was no segregation laws set against black people in Canada. Vancouver was mostly segregated by class. The black community at the time was not particularly impoverished, although by no means were they rich. One settler named Mr. Spots migrated to Vancouver as a child in 1902. His parents were a part of the earliest wave of black immigrants in BC. They came here to get lucky by finding gold in the infamous Fraser Gold Rush. And how can you blame them? Vancouver was quickly becoming another massive economic hub in Canada. Mr. Spots worked as a laborer from his cottage before passing away in 1937 at 75 years old. Now the Crump family had another reason to flock to Vancouver, to escape the escalating racism in the United States. The family was originally from Oklahoma. Mr. Crump, his wife, and two sons, Ronnie and Robert, would entertain the local townsfolk. The twins performed mock boxing routines and tap dancing numbers all across town. They soon became a fixture in what would be remembered as the fabled club and music scene. Now, I actually got the opportunity to sit down with Ronnie himself, one of the Crump twins. He's actually at Renfrew Care Center, and he just turned 95 years old.
Guitar. With the band.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
You guys were, so you said you played music with Louis Armstrong as well.
Yeah.
Oh, how did you end up meeting him there?
Well, we were coming out of the Bay here, at the Bay. And so we always dressed alike. Yeah, so there's always these people next door. No, and we're shout. And so me and Robert always dressed the same, the twins.
Oh, wow.
So we come down to the Palomar. Next level.
The most interesting thing about Hogan's Alley is that there's so many differing opinions on what it meant to Vancouverites. A lot see it as just as a historical thing that happened. A community that once existed but doesn't exist anymore. But to others, it's so much more than that. It's the birth of Black culture in Canada, which is few and far between. There hasn't been a Black community really anywhere else ever since. Of course, there's pockets of Black people that live everywhere in Canada, but nothing like Hogan's Alley.
Big business moved down there.
Oh.
New houses moved in.
Oh, okay.
There's nothing to hang up before they're down there. And then you have a Woodward.
What's that?
Woodwards.
Woodwards.
Yeah.
They built that?
No, that door was there, close to where the people go shop down there. They're Chinatown and Woodwards. And there were two big things that held them there. Now they're all gone now. Woodwards went. And then all the cheap stores went.
A hub like Hogan's Alley is very likely to develop its own culture and have people existing within that area that have their own stories. And Hogan's Alley was actually a bit of a multicultural hub. It was at the southern part of Chinatown and actually was home to a large portion of the Italian community as well. However, it was predominantly occupied by the Black community. The area itself was known for its chicken houses, restaurants like Vi's Chicken and Steakhouse, as previously mentioned during the intro. Restaurants like these would actually also function as speakeasies in their time.
One of the things, the chicken houses was a major institution, and the nightclubs. And the nightclubs mostly weren't Black owned; they were usually Asian owned. Ernie King was the one Black nightclub owner in. And this is not Hogan's, again, this is not Hogan's Alley specifically. Hogan's Alley is like one section of the East End. And, because I think Ernie King owned this place on, I believe it was Hastings Street. Maybe it was Powell, I can't remember off the top of my head. But he owned one, and everybody, but the music in those clubs was all live music, often by Black artists. And then the chicken houses were these institutions owned by Black women in the community. There were just a whole bunch of them over a large number of years. Like, they were very enduring.
Now, apart from this plethora of restaurants, Hogan's Alley was also a place for workers. Most of the people who worked there were porters, or employees who would attend people on sleeping trains. So if people were on a train and they'd be on the train overnight during their journey, the porters are the people who would look after the people on these trains. As mentioned, there was actually a specific building for a lot of them in the area. It was called the Residential Quarters of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Porters. The neighborhood itself was actually very close to a Great Northern Railway station. Now, the location of the community being so close to this railway station, it made it a very convenient area for many people to work there and make a living within that area. Now, of course, we can't talk about the culture of Hogan's Alley without talking about the African Methodist Episcopal Fountain Chapel. It was a very important building to the area. It was designed by someone named Frederick Mellish at around the same time as many of the houses within the area were built. The efforts of the church itself were actually spearheaded a lot by Nora Hendricks, who we will discuss a little bit more in depth later. The chapel was a center for cultural events. It was always busy with services, dinners, even bazaars and meetings. It was a very unique center of community. And of course, being a chapel, it had its own choir. The choir itself was, once again, spearheaded by Nora Hendricks. And it was because of the founding of said chapel that Hogan's Alley actually began to flourish for the Black community. So its construction helped create a cultural center for them, and they rallied behind it. Today, the building itself still stands as a registered heritage monument. See, there are also quite a few notable people who used to live in Hogan's Alley during the time that the neighborhood was still standing. As previously mentioned, there was Nora and Al Hendricks, the respective grandmother and father of renowned musician and guitar player Jimi Hendrix. They lived in the neighborhood for quite some time. Nora, as mentioned, lived in the neighborhood up until its destruction in the 1960s. She was a driving force of the community and very involved within Methodist Chapel. That was kind of the cultural center of the area. And her son, Al, lived with her until he left for Seattle in the 1940s. Sadly, her husband passed away before this time. Both of them, however, both Al and Nora were known to participate in vaudeville performances in their community. And on occasion, when he was younger, even Jimi Hendrix would visit the area to see his grandma, who still lived there.
Here, when he spent parts of school years in Vancouver, he actually went to elementary school in Vancouver for a while, so he was around. And what's funny is you talk to some of the elders, and they all have stories related to Jimi Hendrix, and a surprising number of them are about beating him up.
Excuse me.
Kind of like bullying him, and because it's funny. I talked to some people like I think part of it is a little bit of kind of trying to claim, okay, everybody knows who he is, but there was an actual community of people, like people overemphasize and Jimi Hendrix, which wasn't hear that. So I think part of their reason why those stories get told is a way of kind of reclaiming their own claim on the space rather than him. But also they said, they sort of said, yeah, I mean, he used to brag all the time. He would brag about how he was going to be the greatest guitarist in the world. He was going to be the Black Elvis and all this kind of stuff. They just thought he was ridiculous. And so they would like just bully him and slap him around. And then they're like, well, little did we know he did go on.
Hogan's Alley was home to many performers and talented individuals. They would live and perform and work in Hogan's Alley. Examples of such are singer and actor Thelma Gibson Towns and her brother George Towns, who did a lot of work with the Negro Workshop Dance Group, who would also eventually go on to do a lot of work with Ballet British Columbia. Others lived there, such as sprinter Barbara Howard and actor Ernie King. These were the type of people that grew up and existed within Hogan's Alley, and who they are helped shape our understanding of the community and the people that lived there and what kind of people were produced from this cultural center within Vancouver.
Sadly, Hogan's Alley was not to last. The area had already been targeted numerous times by urban reform plans. Many parts of the neighborhood were targeted for renewal, as Black and Chinese neighborhoods were most often the targets. Most of Hogan's Alley and part of Chinatown was
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, and welcome to 1680 The Crow. I'm Tiger Ann, and here is your news at 1 o'clock. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry, along with Health Minister Adrian Dix, will have their first COVID-19 briefing today for the first time in 3 weeks. Dix indicated that the province may introduce another booster shot for the immunity-compromised population. Dix also want more people to get their third booster shot. 58% of the residents over the age of 12 have had the booster shot. BC is also expected to drop its vaccine passport requirements later this week. BC government says BC Transit, TransLink, Metro Vancouver's public transportation network, will receive a total of $204 million to help offset revenues lost during the pandemic. TransLink will receive $176 million, and BC Transit will receive the remaining $28 million to recover from the pandemic. TransLink reported its ridership bounced back to about 67% compared to pre-pandemic riderships, while BC Transit has seen a recovery of 70%. The Transportation Ministry says a 5 km section of Highway 1 in southeastern BC will be closed for 1 month as upgrades are underway. The construction will be along Kicking Horse Canyon. In 2 weeks and until May 20th, all traffic on Highway 1 from Golden to Castle Junction will be detoured via Radium Hot Spring, adding about extra 90 minutes of traveling. Packaged enoki mushrooms in BC have been recalled due to a possible listeria contamination. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the affected Mingxiang brand enoki mushrooms were sold in 200 grams packages with the best before date up to and including April 4th. Listeria contamination won't make the food look or smell bad, but bacteria can cause symptoms such as vomiting, nausea, fever, muscle aches, severe headaches, and neck stiffness. Well, here is your latest update on the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. Ukrainian President Zelensky has told the UN Security Council that Russian military must be brought to justice immediately for war crimes, and says Russian forces have committed crimes around Ukraine.
The massacre in our city of Bucha is unfortunately, only one of many examples of what the occupiers have been doing on our land for the past 41 days. And there are many more cities, similar places where the world has yet to learn the full truth.
The European Union says 19 Russian diplomats are being expelled from Belgium. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell says he decided to designate persona non grata, aka unwelcoming, a number of officials of the permanent mission of the Russian Federation to the EU for engaging in activities contrary to their diplomatic status. He said the Russian envoy was being summoned to the EU to explain their move. In civilian casualties, at least 1,430 civilians have been killed in Ukraine, including more than 121 children. According to the UN's aid chief Martin Griffiths, he said that this is likely a serious underestimate. Russia also claimed that images of massacre in Bucha presented by Ukrainian authorities are fake, or that deaths happened after the Russian troops were withdrawn. 2 Harvard University students have launched a website to connect refugees fleeing from Ukraine with hosts in other countries that is willing to take them in. Reporter Julia Walker has more.
Marco Burstein and Avi Schiffman say they were moved by the plight of Ukrainians fleeing the country following Russia's invasion. Burstein says so far 18,000 hosts have signed up across the globe.
We've heard all sorts of amazing stories of hosts and refugees getting connected all over the world.
Ricard Mizrav in Sweden is one of those hosts who signed up online.
The next morning, I had a message from Oksana, asked if we had a place for them, for her daughter and their cat.
According to the United Nations, the number of Ukrainians fleeing the country topped a staggering 4 million, half of them children. I'm Julie Walker.
On to sports. The Toronto Raptors will be tipping off against the Atlanta Hawks today at 4:30 p.m. The Raptors are looking to bounce back after Kyle Lowry and the Heat ended their 5-game win streak. Both squads are suffering from injuries. Raptors will be without OG Anunoby, Yuta Watanabe, and Isaac Bonga. And the Hawks will have to play without Bogdan Bogdanovic, Danilo Gallinari, and their big man John Collins. And Vancouver Canucks forward Brock Boeser is out with an upper body injury. The team plays the Golden Knights again tomorrow. And in Champions League, quarterfinals is kicked off today at 12. We have 2 games happening as we speak. Liverpool is currently up 2-0 against Benfica at half, with Ibrahima Konate scoring the first goal and Sadio Mane scoring the second. And Manchester City is 0-0 against Atletico Madrid at half. Well, that was your news at 1 o'clock. I'm Tiger M. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.